What's up, everyone? My name's Dylan Reismus, and this is my marine science project. For my project, I did a fishing comparison on the baits between anchovies and fake baits, such as swim baits like these worms, and other jigs, such as the Lucky Craft Flash Minnow. Once I chose this topic, the first thing I did was text my uncle, pictured here. Him and I have fished in the past, and I knew he would have some good advice on where I should go and what I need to do to be successful for this project. After this conversation with my uncle, and learning that when the water temperatures decrease during the fall season, that the striped bass are oftentimes up against the shore, I went over to the Western Lagoon in Belmarin Keys and went casting there for a few times. I sadly came up with nothing and moved on to casting the anchovies out on a different dock. Shout out Michael for letting me use your dock. Once I had the anchovy hooked up, I was ready to cast out. As seen here, the rod was a lot heavier at this time because I had a weight on the top of my line that I had just added on to make sure that the anchovy reached the bottom of the water and was able to activate by itself rather than me having to reel it in to give it action. This is me reeling in the heavier weight and sadly coming up with nothing. After a few days of repeating this process over and over, in which I fished for many hours off Michael's dock in both the mornings and the evenings, still coming up with nothing, I decided it was time to switch locations. I drove over further down the road and ended up here, off the Eastern Lagoon in Belmarin Keys, where the public trail meets the neighborhood. This area looked very promising from the start, as there were striped bass jumping immediately once I got there for the flies that were sitting on top of the water. What an electric moment, as I had finally hooked a striped bass after many hours of fishing. I was stressed out enough, and that definitely didn't help, as the fish almost jumped out of the water, snapping my line on my pole, and also almost hopping off the lure himself. I then frantically lifted him onto the bank and told my friend to forget the net, as I needed to land this fish and not let him go. Once I got myself situated and had the fish onto the shore, my next steps were to get the hook out of its mouth, both safely for the fish and safely for myself. This lure, the Flash Minnow that I showed earlier in my presentation, quickly became my favorite lure, as I had 4 bites in this one night alone and was able to land 2 striped bass. Though this lure was very successful in helping me catch and land striped bass, it was actually a lot more difficult than I thought to get the hook out of the fish's mouth. This lure uses a set of treble hooks, which are hooks that have 3 different spots to land the fish once it bites, which made it a lot more difficult to get it out of the fish's mouth than a standard lure. I was extremely excited and very relieved as I had finally caught a striped bass after hours of fishing. I decided to stay for a little while longer, and still using the same Flash Minnow lure, about a half an hour later, I caught another striped bass. I repeated the same steps that I had previously done to make sure I landed this fish, in which I put him on the bank and safely removed the hook. Overall, the lures were a lot more successful while fishing than the anchovies, as I had a total of 6 bites on the lures and a total of 0 using the anchovies. Thank you to everyone who helped me during this project. You're very much appreciated.